Hi everyone, I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and today we are going to play with a sock blank. What is a sock blank? It is a piece of knit fabric that in this case contains 2 strands of Knit Pick Stroll, which is 75% superwash merino, 25% nylon, knit together. So that way when we dye it in whatever wild pattern we want to create, we could unravel it to get 2 matched pairs of sock yarn that you can either use for socks or to make a symmetrical type project later on. So they're a really, really fun tool, and you can either make them yourself or buy them like the one from Knit Picks. And I do have affiliate links down in the video description. But before I get started and talking more about the project, I want to give a huge shout out and thank you to today's lab partner, Deb. Deb, thank you so much for being my lab partner today, and I hope that you're gonna love the silly fun we have with this yarn. I have had these rainbow swirl lollipops for a really long time. My neighbor had what I think was a circus themed birthday party approaching 2 years ago, so pre-pandemic, and you know, she offered me these later on, and I was like, yeah, I think that they would be really, really fun to try to dye some yarn. Now, I've used other candy to leave imprints of their patterns on yarn in the past. Candy canes gave a really, really fun result, in addition to other things. Now, the reason why this works is because these contain food coloring. Now, if you look at the ingredients, you can see yellow 5, yellow 6, blue 1, and red 40. This is just artificial food coloring that I've used in many, many videos and works to dye protein-based yarns like wool that we're using today, alpaca, silk, mohair, animal fibers like that. Unfortunately, this won't work on cotton or acrylic and polyester, but you might get some decent results with blends. So let's have some fun. Now, the one side to dyeing yarn with candy is that you can end up with a little bit of an icky, sticky mess, but I think that the color on here is probably only around the outside, so we're not gonna be dissolving the whole candy on the yarn, but we're gonna be hand painting on the countertop and then adding some other celebratory type decorations to our yarn. At least that's my plan, but we'll see what happens as we make our decision. And each of them have 2 sides, so in theory we can use them twice. To dye yarn with food coloring, I already mentioned the yarn you need, but you also will need some acid and some heat. I have been pre-soaking my blank in just some plain tap water right here, and now I'm going to add some white vinegar or acetic acid. I'm going to add 1, 2, approximately 3 tablespoons of white vinegar. In general, the more acid that you add, the faster the colors will start to strike to the yarn, which means that they might spread a little bit less. But it does depend a bit on the fiber type. And I'm just going to go ahead and press this and move it a little bit so that way it's mixed up and the acid can access all the fibers. Now, I've soaked the blank for at least 30 minutes. And so now we can really go and get set up. Oh no, this one I was holding broke. I was hoping that it would be less fragile than candy canes, but at least I should be able to hold it together a little bit. Oh, but actually, we can now see that there is some color towards the interior, but most of the pigment that we have on these is on the outside, which is good for our case because I think that we should be able to get a nice imprint. Think back to the Candy Hearts video. I was hoping that these are going to be easier to open up than the candy canes, which I found really, really difficult. But okay, I think with scissors, and then is this going to come off? There we go. Okay, hopefully this won't be too bad. Okay, I think we're ready. I have protected my work surface with plastic wrap that we can use both to prevent staining my countertop and when we're ready to set the color on the blank, we can wrap up the blank with this so that we won't get color transfer from one part of the blank to another. I squeezed out some of the water from our pre-soaking blank, but there is still a lot of liquid in here. I would call it pretty well saturated versus damp. And the rationale for this is that I want there to be enough liquid here in the blank that we can have some colors from our lollipops start to bind to it. So right now I am laying it out and blocking it a little bit so that way we can have it on here. And then I'm going to take a lollipop, bring it over, and add it onto the blank like so. I honestly haven't thought about a pattern, and I'm bringing, since my hands are a little damp from touching the blank, I'm bringing just a paper towel to press that down into the blank. And I think I'm just going to add these randomly around. I haven't decided yet what kind of coloration we are going to add to our background. There's going to be more color than just these lollipops. And we will probably do the other side as well. But the fun thing about having a blank like this is that we have so much space, and it doesn't matter if the patterning is the most even at all. So I've placed them all down. Now I'm coming in, sort of pressing them all in. I really don't, or I'm attempting to not introduce liquid to the other side because I don't want to dissolve that color, because I do want to be able to flip them over and add color to the other side. And I have one that is broken that I'm going to attempt to put back together-ish over here. Ish. Press it down. The nice thing also is that this will be unraveled, but I'm now curious, so I think we're gonna peek. I think this is the first one that we put down. And look at that. That is so cool. That is so cool. Okay, we are gonna press it down. I'm gonna let everything sit for, I think, about 10 minutes to give it a chance to dissolve. But while we're waiting, and again, we do have the other side to add more of these bright polka dots around. This could be left as simple as this with the white background, but I think that I want to bring in some other elements of fun and celebration, and I don't know if they're gonna work. I'll probably test on a paper towel. I still have these Easter egg markers left over from last summer, and so I thought that maybe we'd spray some like party type patches of color around. At least that's my thought. But yeah, I mean, we'll see. We'll give this some time and we'll see how it turns out. Another option would be to take, say, a color mist spray or something and spray around them. And we could even get some cool resist from where these sticks are. But I think that's what I did with the candy canes. I just want to do something different. So a third option would be, I've got some little paint brushes that actually came from like a food coloring paint on cookie set, and I could take some food coloring and add some like confetti type marks around. And so that's actually a direction I'm also leaning. But let's see what we get from our imprints. There is also another option. I could decide I like the level of color with these sporadic rainbow swirls and not add more color. But it's been 10 minutes, and so let's see. Ooh, that is cool. And there's still color here. So I'm gonna actually place this down right there, and we're not gonna flip to the other side yet. If I can get 2 imprints per side, then maybe I won't add any other color. This is really, really cool. Okay, I think this is my broken one that I added at the end. Oh, that is so pretty. So there's definitely some pitting on here because where the fibers came into contact, that's where it dissolved the most. But this is awesome. Okay, I am going to carefully lift and move all of these into various spots, trying to get some more coverage in places where I didn't have it before. Yeah, I think that we're only going to use these lollipops. All those ideas that I had were great, but I don't think that it's necessary because we're going to have space for more imprints. And I think that that is everything. So I'm going to get a new paper towel and come in and press everything down. Now, do we need to wait 10 whole minutes? Probably not, but it does give time for some liquid to go in, and so that way things can spread a little bit. Now, I'll zoom you in to one of these swirls in just a moment. This is so cool. But the one thing I do want to point out is that the color we see the least of here is the purple. And in part, that's because, well, these have been actually sitting on a windowsill for a bit, so I think that the purple may have faded a little bit. But yeah, and some of them it's definitely faded. But also, there isn't red 3 in here, which is that bright pink. Red 40 is more of the crimson red. And so what you end up with that is a more grayish purple. But this is amazing. Now I am planning to unravel this blank, so we will be able to see how things look at the end. Clearly, we're gonna have some rainbow speckles and some sections of white, and that is gonna be really, really fun. Now, I don't really have a gradient of any kind going on here, and we really could have done this just directly on a hank of yarn, but then you wouldn't see the little swirl pattern, and so I'm really, really, really excited by this. Now, is this a technique that you necessarily really, really want to do? Maybe not. I think that this is a great technique for having leftover lollipops, but it would probably be pretty expensive to go and buy these lollipops just for this technique. However, seeing these fun swirls, I just couldn't resist. I also think this is a good project to demonstrate how sometimes I have many ideas of how I might want to use things going forward, and sometimes that involves adding more color to the project, or sometimes I can embrace the white and really embrace the magic and fun that we get just from these lollipops themselves. So I am really, really excited. And after 10 minutes, we will come back and check and see how much color left is on the one side, but I have a feeling we'll probably flip to the other and try to distribute those swirly dots around the blank. I don't think I've talked about how we're going to heat set this really. I did mention that we will wrap it up in the plastic wrap, which will prevent color transfer from one area to another, but we have two choices. I could either wrap this up and steam it in my microwave, or we could wrap it up and put it in a steamer basket on the stovetop to steam set it that way. And I'm sure you could all think of many other options for heat setting it as well. The main thing is whatever technique you try, you really don't want things to dry out. And we are going to have to do a fair amount of washing on the other side because there's sugar and other stuff that's now in the yarn that we will want to rinse out. But the fact that we don't have these lollipops dissolving completely on the yarn means that it should not be so bad. Okay, let's lift and see. That's still a lot of pigment, and I think, yeah, let's do a third. We're gonna do a third on this side before flipping over. Yeah, I think that that sounds like a plan. Oh, as I went ahead and flipped those ones over. But I am going to just move and place. I am trying to add some color to the edge and try to shift around a little bit where some of these colors are located, just to give us some good amount of coverage. But goodness, I mean, this is so good with just the one side, then I'm wondering if, I'm now debating if I should do a second blank with the other side of these. Oh, interesting. The key, I think, is coming and pressing it in. We'll see how I feel. Maybe after this stage of 10 minutes, I'll remove them all onto a plate and then we will evaluate, because this coverage is really, really good. Oh, this is so much fun. Deb, thank you so much for being my lab partner. I really, 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 really hope you're gonna like it. Oh, this is so fun. But maybe I'll go pre-soak another blank just in case. It's been 10 minutes and there's still a lot of color down here. So what I'm gonna do with just this one is add a little bit more there, because that's a spot I feel like wants it. And then I am going to carefully, okay, so this one, the color is almost all the way gone. So I think it will depend a little bit on them, but I'm removing them. And there's definitely some of these, this round, are definitely less bright than the previous ones. No question. Yeah, because there's just more. Oh, funny. This one has a lot of color left, but it did not leave very much there. So I think just how it's been pressed in also makes a difference. But like this one, you can see, has very little color left on it. Okay, I have those all placed on a plate. I'm gonna let that one sit. Oh, you can't even see it. There we go. I'm gonna leave this last one here to sit for a few minutes. Oh, and I forgot one down on the other corner, which I've now removed. So we're gonna just let it sit for a few minutes, remove it, and then we will prepare to steam set this in the microwave. But I think that this is gonna lead to a really fun rainbow speckled type yarn, and I'm really excited. I'm not going to be knitting a swatch, even though I will unravel the yarn, but I wanted to point out a little bit about how it might knit up. We've got sections of white, followed by sections where when we unravel it, we'll probably have rainbow, and depending on how the color penetrated, rainbow speckles in a section, which is just going to be really, really fun. And they may pool, they may not pool. The blanks are knit back and forth, so unless you knit something with the exact same gauge, you're not going to see the spirals line up. But because of how they're placed, there could be some bigger sections of white and some with more color, and it's going to just be so much fun. It's been 10 minutes, and let's remove this last one, which isn't quite as bright as, say, that one. It's definitely brighter than that one, which was, I guess, has everything been done 2 times or 3 times? I don't even know. I've lost track. But let's look at the whole thing. This blank is beautiful, and we've taken a really nice look at a lot of this so far, and I am really excited. But now I am going to roll it up into a jelly roll. So on this edge, I just folded over the plastic wrap. And now I am going to start wrapping it up. And as I wrap, you can see that there's a tiny bit, you see a hint, a shadow of the color on the reverse side. And we'll take a good look at the reverse side when we are done with our project. But this gives me a great hypothesis that we are gonna see some speckling. And there's a reasonable amount of color on this side. There's definitely pitting, but the reverse side is ready to go. So we're gonna dye a whole other blank. But first, we're gonna microwave this one. So I'm gonna place this jelly roll into a microwave safe dish, and I'm gonna microwave it on high using 2-minute increments for a total of 4 minutes, or until the yarn is hot to touch. The reason why I microwave in increments is that you don't want to risk scorching the yarn, and if things get too dry, you microwave too long, it could burn, especially with some of the sugar in there. But it might take closer to 6 minutes for this blank this time because there is a lot of liquid in that blank. So you could go up to 6 minutes, but just every 2 minutes I go and I touch it, and if it feels really hot to touch, we're good, we're done. And then we'll let it cool slowly over the span of 30 minutes to an hour before we open it up. 4 minutes was sufficient to get this really hot to touch and nice and steamy inside. The reason why you don't need as much time in the microwave is that after the microwave, things will stay hot for a while and cool off really slowly. So you do get a prolonged exposure to heat, just it's not in a pot. And so it's a nice way to be able to use more things at once if you have limited stovetop space. But personally, I only use food coloring and food safe dyes in my microwave. That's just a choice that I've made personally. But someday I might get a separate dedicated ChemKnits microwave to use with acid dyes and things like that. While we waited for the first one to cool, I added more plastic wrap onto my countertop, spread out a second blank, and used the other side of these lollipops to create more colors. Since the top of them sort of dried out in the 10 minutes that I had them sitting on a plate. So I just pressed them down with my hands. I wasn't worried about getting color transfer onto them because I had used up that side, so I wasn't gonna mess up the design in any kind of way. In between each placement, I did wait about 10 minutes before lifting up the lollipops and moving them to new places. And once I was satisfied with the color here on the blank, I wrapped it up and microwaved it on high for probably about 4 minutes using 2-minute increments, just like I did for the first one. There is a surprising amount of pigment left on these lollipops, but I think it's time to say goodbye to them. They're old and we're gonna say goodbye. But once everything cools, then we can unwrap these blanks and wash them. Okay, let's unwrap the yarn. There's an edge. Ooh, these spirals are so bright and pretty. But the back, there's barely no color on the back. That means that these are gonna be speckles. I'm really glad that now I have one that I can unravel for Deb and that I have one we can leave intact so we can compare them. But this is so pretty. Trying to be careful because I don't want to start unraveling the blank while I remove it. Dyeing knit blanks is so satisfying, and something about this is just so delightful. Now, you could totally paint this kind of pattern onto a blank using commercial dyes of some kind. You definitely don't have to use lollipops, but I hope that you all can appreciate the whimsy of it. Now, I don't feel a lot of candy residue, but that doesn't mean it's not there. So we will need to go ahead and wash this a number of times. But just sitting here in some plain tap water, there is no bleeding whatsoever, and I don't feel the residue on here. But I will pay attention, especially as we unravel it. And I'll show you the finished blanks before we do. I'm now gonna add just some clear dish soap. But what I was trying to say is that I will definitely be checking the dry blanks for feeling of any residue. And I am going to soak and wash this a few more times than maybe I would otherwise, just because I do want to make sure that there's none of that residue there, because I don't want the yarn to be crunchy. But, oh dear, I also don't want to start unraveling the blanks. So I will be careful with my vigorous washing. But since there is no bleeding, I am going to go ahead and do this washing off camera, and then I'll be back when the yarn is dry. These are absolutely delightful. Beyond delightful. This is magical. Here are the finished blanks, and it's just so fun. The spirals worked so well We had just the right amount of vinegar. Things struck. It didn't really spread. We had enough water in there so that way things struck, and it's just so much fun. Now, I think that this is a colorway where it doesn't really matter that the blanks were double-stranded. I think that if these were single-stranded blanks, there isn't going to be a huge difference from knitting from this end and knitting from that end because the colors are all ultimately fairly random placed. But what I need to do now is go and unravel one of these blanks to send to our lab partner, Deb. But before we do that, if we look at the back of the blank, again, there is pretty much no color there, and I think, yeah, that's true for both of them. So that means that we're gonna have sections of white and then sections with little itty bitty rainbowy speckles. And I'm really excited to see what this looks like. Okay, now looking at the yarn, if we go through one of these sections, can you see those itty bitty speckles and that it's matched? Let me go, I'm gonna go there and back. And so again, the speckles are going to vary in their color, but because of the resist that we had on this blank just from the stitches themselves, like if I draw that apart, you see the white on the inside, that is what is giving us the speckles on here. But anyway, I'm gonna go unravel this blank and I will be right back. Here is the yarn where we have random patches that I would say are between maybe around 8 to 10 of these large speckles long. And when the speckles show up, they are in a fairly regular, almost repeat, just because of the way the stitches were in the blank. But it's fun just because they shift colors, and within some of the speckles themselves, they are multicolored, and that's not from breaking, that's just from these swirls of the lollipop. Let me see if I find a good spot. Okay, well, here within these orange and yellow, you can see that, yeah, there's just many examples where you can see multiple colors within one little speck. And so it is ultimately going to be really subtle, give you a funfetti, a confetti type yarn, but with lots of little colors in there. Now, the next step is going to be for me to go and soak this yarn a little bit because it does have some crimp to it, just because it's an unraveled blank, and that will relax the crimp, and I'll hang it to dry, and then Deb, I'm going to send it to you. So Deb, thank you so much for being my lab partner today. I really hope you enjoyed this fun, experimental, sweet experiment. Thank you again for being my lab partner, Deb. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to the ChemKnits Tutorials YouTube channel and turn on your notifications so you never miss a new video. I always publish videos at least twice a week, and you don't want to miss a thing. And if you love the content and want to help support it, I do have a Patreon and Etsy shop, and so on Etsy you can buy some of the yarn that's featured in these videos. And it's a great way to get some beautiful yarn and support the content at the same time. Now, I remembered that I wanted to mention that there's no stickiness or stiffness to this yarn. All of the lollipop non-food coloring stuff that was in here from those imprints was washed out completely, so there is no residual stickiness. Phew! Now, could you create something like this without lollipops? Sure! Mix some acid dyes with, do one of the Guar mixtures, and with a paintbrush, you could paint some little swirls all around of different colors to get a really similar type of effect. So you don't have to use candy, but this was a really good use for some expired candy that I didn't really want to eat. It's making me so happy! They just make me so happy. Oh. Thank you so much for watching, everyone.